What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another polyglot investigation. So if you're anything like me, you probably follow most of the big polyglot YouTubers out there because you're curious to see what they're up to, how they learn languages, and also every now and then they share really interesting stories you've never heard about. And this is where this investigation comes from. See, it comes from a YouTube channel called Olly Richards, who has 500,000 followers, and he dropped a video about 2 weeks ago called "He Learned 24 Languages, Then They Scanned His Brain." Now, naturally, when I hear someone's learned 24 languages and they've even had their brain scanned, I'm super curious because that is like probably the ultimate language clickbait title out there. So I jumped into the video, here it is. He learned 24 languages, then they scanned his brain. Vaughn Smith is an ordinary guy with an ordinary job. He cleans carpets in Washington, D.C. Nothing unusual except for one thing. He speaks 24 languages. So we have a carpet cleaner in Washington, D.C. who's had his brain scanned and he speaks 24 languages. This guy must be a savant or something like that, because why does he speak so many languages and then at the same time work as a carpet cleaner? Like, there's something strange happening here. Now, I watched this video all the way through. It was fascinating, but there was something nagging at me. The fact that it just was all just taken as truth. There was really no evidence presented. So I had to start an investigation. So the way my community and I do an investigation is like this. We open up a Google Doc and we basically work together to figure out, one, what languages the person speaks, two, what they claim to speak, like their ability for each one of these languages, three, any courses and stuff they're selling, and then four, and most importantly, we actually investigate each language using both learners and natives of those languages to find out if those claims are actually true. And this is the document in question. As you can see, it is 75 pages long. We dived deep to get the information on this guy to find out what was really going on here. And this blew out into a pretty crazy investigation because we didn't just end up investigating the guy, but the study itself, the one, where they actually scanned his brain. Now, before starting this investigation, strangely enough, I'd never heard about this guy, Vaughn Smith. And I say strangely enough because there is so many articles about him online and in multiple different languages. So clearly, this guy is well known, at least in some part of the world, because it is so strange that I've generally never heard about this guy before, but there are so many articles. In fact, if I compare him to all the Hyperpolyglot investigations I've done, there is more news on this guy than any of them, maybe even combined. So here is one from the Washington Post, the remarkable brain of a carpet cleaner who speaks 24 languages. Now, unfortunately, it is behind a paywall, but we did have someone who actually has access to this give us information on what it says. So, how many languages do you speak? Oh goodness, Vaughn says 8 fluently. 8? Marvels? 8, Vaughn confirms. English, Spanish, Bulgarian, Czech, Portuguese, Romanian, Russian, and Slovak. But if you go by different grades, how much conversation he explains, I know about 25 more. Vaughn glances at me. He's still underselling his abilities. By his count, it is actually 37 more languages, with at least 24 he speaks well enough to carry on lengthy conversations. So this just gets deeper and deeper. Now, this is the study in question. Functional characterization of language network of polyglots and hyperpolyglots with precision fMRI. And it says right down here, how do polyglots, individuals who speak 5 or more languages, process their languages, and what can this population tell us about the language system? Using fMRI, we identified language network in each 34 polyglots, including 16 hyperpolyglots with knowledge of 10 plus languages, and examined their response to native languages, non-native language of varying proficiency, and unfamiliar languages. The fact that they managed to find 16 hyperpolyglots, true to earth 16 hyperpolyglots, that is suspicious. Okay, so this is the supplementary information for that study, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump through this to find Vaughn the participant. Now, you're probably wondering how we figured this out. What we did is we matched the languages that he speaks to the participants' languages. So here we have 867. Now, you can see the list of languages there, and we've basically got a number, and that number tells us where he believes he sits within the ability to use this language. And the way this study did it was basically you had 1 to 20, and 20 was basically native level ability to use this language. Now, as you can see in the Google Doc, we've actually mapped out these languages, and now we can see what his claim is for each one of the languages. And as you can see in the fluent section, he's got English, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, Czech, Slovak, Bulgarian, and Romanian. So we've got 8 languages there. And a shite ton of more languages, which is either conversational or his basic in, but as you can see, a lot of languages. Now, as I said, there's a lot of media coverage of him, so we also found this video here, Vaughn Smith, A Life of a Hyperpolyglot. And this one, basically, if you jump through all the timestamps, it actually tells you the languages he speaks. And this is that list completely here, with what his claim is for each one of these languages. As you can see, timestamps where he speaks different languages. At the start of the video, he claims to have a beginner grasp of 36, fluent in about 8. So you can see we're starting to get like a matchup now. Now, I'm going to bring this up because this is something he brings up. He claims that he has autism. Now, this could either help or hinder, the number of languages he claims to speak, but I figured I would definitely mention this because someone's going to mention it in the comments. Now, if we scroll down into the article, we can actually see right here it says, a carpet cleaner in Maryland has a secret. There's nothing else to call it but a superpower, but you would never know unless you took him to the UN headquarters. Vaughn Smith from Maryland is a hyperpolyglot, a person who speaks 11 languages or more. In basic sense, it means learning languages comes easy. So, before we start mapping his languages and actually checking his ability in each one of these languages, what we're going to use is the Common European Framework to basically analyze his ability in each one of these languages. Now, for someone who's never seen this before, this is basically a system of testing to figure out how well you speak a language. Now, if you have a look at this, we've got A1 to C2. A1 is your basic entry level. You've got the pronunciation, some basic greetings, some very basic questions. Now, for those who talk about fluency, it generally means B2+. A native generally sits around the C1 level, and then someone who has university education is usually around the C2 level. Now, I'm saying usually a lot here because, it could vary quite a bit. But I do want to point out that this has nothing to do with accents. This is ability to use the language. Additionally, this is not a linear graph, okay? So if you have a look at this, there's actually kind of an upward curve that happens here, which shows that there's a big distance between some levels compared to others. Now, taking all of that information, we've jammed it down into this graph so we can actually just see this in one place. And as you can see, this is just insane, the amount of languages that are claimed here. Now, I've got a bunch of languages under C1, along with English and Spanish, which are native languages, although Spanish is it's native, but it's not on the same level as English if you read his life story. However, he did place it in the same fluent category as English, along with Bulgarian, Czech, Portuguese, Romanian. He doesn't distinguish between these, so they all went into the C1 category. And then based on that study that we saw, and then also those videos and timestamps, we've placed these other languages into their different categories. Now, here's the kicker, okay? If you go to the attached document in the description, you will actually find next to many of the languages, for example, Romanian, which he considers himself to be fluent in, we have no video proof whatsoever that he speaks this language. Now, this is not to say he doesn't speak the language. It's just we don't have any video proof. And in fact, this is a common thread through all of his languages. We either have no video proof at all, or we have very, very little. I'm talking like one line of him speaking these languages. And only for a few languages do we actually have some video proof where we have the ability to judge his ability in these languages. Now, that obviously is quite strange, but I'm guessing there could be a number of reasons for this. One, he's a carpet cleaner. He doesn't need to prove his ability in these languages. He's not selling language courses or anything like that out there. He doesn't work within the language space. He literally cleans carpets for a living. So why would he have to prove that he speaks these languages? But on the flip side, this guy's been interviewed more than any hyperpolyglot I know, so why is there not more evidence of him speaking these languages? It's actually quite a conundrum for me. Now, for all those languages that he claims but we have no proof for, unfortunately, I can't say yes or no if he speaks these languages or not because no proof whatsoever, which means that I need to strike Romanian, which is one of his fluent languages, and 2 of his B2 languages and 1 of his B1 languages, which is, for most polyglots out there, would be all of their languages. But this guy's got a lot of claimed languages, so I guess we'll see. So what we've done now is we've collapsed that list with all those languages which we found no evidence for. And now what we have to do, unfortunately, is start removing languages where we have one line of evidence for. We're literally talking here lines like, my name is, or something so short that we just cannot judge it, like realistically, because the judgment would say anywhere between A2 and C1. That's not a fair judgment. And unfortunately, that means a lot of languages are about to go. Okay, as you can see right here, all those languages with a strike through them, they're basically now being removed. Now, if you want to go see him speaking one line of these languages, please go to the attached document. We do have actual reviews of that one line in there, but I don't think realistically it would be fair for me to place them on the scale, even though some people have given like a level to that one line, because we could be either massively overshooting it or massively undershooting it. Now, based on that, we've collapsed that list again, and now we're down to a much smaller, much more reasonable to manage list. Now, there is one language on this list right here. If you look, it's right under Arabic, it's Salish. We have evidence of him speaking this language. Again, not much, but we don't actually have a reviewer who speaks this language, so I'm just going to leave it there where he claimed it at A2. So, now what we're going to do is we're going to go look at the evidence for these other languages, and we're going to start from the left at Arabic, and we're going to work our way all the way up to the C1 languages. And then as we go through each one, we're going to push it into its actual position.
أهلا وسهلا. أنا فان من واشنطن، وأنا درست اللغة العربية في المدرسة. وأنا أتكلم العربية قليلا فقط. خلاص الصفات los números es así 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 أنا أقرأ القرآن.
Okay, so let's see what the reviewers said. He only said where he's from and where he learned Arabic, and then he counted to 10. Not really a lot to go off. He was understandable though, although his pronunciation was very forced and not completely accurate. It's definitely basic. If this is all he can do, it's A0. Very, very basic sentences. Okay pronunciation though, no subtitles needed, but based on hello, my name is and I am from A1. Just a few sentences. The pronunciation doesn't seem that good, but he himself said that he only speaks it a little bit. I think I need more proof of him speaking to judge his abilities, but based on this one, I'd say A2, because he can say some sentences like I studied Arabic at school. So based on that, although one person said A0 and another said A1, and then finally we had an A2 in there, I'm going to go with the safe option and basically say an A2. Now again, for Salish, we don't actually have someone who speaks this language. So next up, Catalan.
I com vas aprendre català, tu? A veure. Mira, el català, amb la Sagrada Família. Però tu no has estat mai a Barcelona?
No.
No. I tens intenció de venir alguna vegada o no?
Sí.
Quan? A veure, quan?
Sí, jo no estic segur quan, exacte.
Vale. Però t'agradaria venir. I tinc entès que tu vas aprendre una mica el català cartejant-te, enviant-te correspondència, cartes, amb una noia de Mallorca. És així?
Això es diu Beatriz Guijarro, que viu a Palma de Mallorca.
Fa bastants anys, no, d'això?
Com se diu?
Que dic que fa anys, no?, que vas començar a parlar amb ella.
Fa molts anys, fa més que 20 anys. Jo vaig conèixer altra dona que és d'Argentina. El seu pare és húngar, la seva mare és catalana.
So there was a second one here, which was a radio interview, but it's got no actual video, and I figured that would be boring to show here, but you can go see it. And it says, judging from the interview on the radio, his Catalan is quite dubious. He gets by filling the gaps with Spanish, but then the gaps include some very basic words like to know. I wouldn't say he's anywhere above an A2, and I wouldn't call it intermediate. The video interview isn't long enough to judge. Regarding his claim, in the interview he states that he does not speak very good Catalan, but he can communicate. Then in the video he states that he had not spoken it for decades and only used it briefly with someone. Overall, his ability really is not that of an absolute beginner, as he can speak beyond basic sentences and understand advanced discourses, but he struggles to generate even slightly complex sentences, far from an intermediate level. Much of his knowledge is based on Castilian or other languages too. I would estimate his level at above a medium-high A1. Now, his Catalan has been pushed down quite a bit because of his own ability to use the language, even though he can get by quite well through his understanding of Spanish and other adjacent languages. Next up, Dutch.
Nederlands kan je ook spreken.
Ja, de laatste maal spreek Nederlands, dat was in Starbucks.
In this short clip, Vaughn aims to say the last time I spoke Dutch was in Starbucks. It sounds like he says this right here, Literally the last time spoke I Dutch was in Starbucks, probably transferring vocab from German. I'm not sure what happened in the sentence as he stumbled through the middle of it, but for such a short clip, one simple sentence, there is a lot to be concerned about. A native reviewer would be useful to confirm these observations. I couldn't have it described his Dutch better than reviewer 1, and 3, what I will add is that his accent is confusing. It sounds like an American speaking a sentence from a screen pronouncing the words like how they would sound in English. Keeping in mind the clip is short, but the sentence spoken is nothing challenging. Nothing much to add after the previous 3 reviewers, except that I wouldn't put this guy at a low A2. I'd put him around a low A1 total beginner. And basically, as you can see, they're all just saying, you know, A1 working towards A2, A1, and then again down here, I would rate him A1 at most. So now his Dutch has been pushed all the way down to A1, so let's move on to German.
Welche Sprache sprichst du am besten von all diesen Sprachen?
Am besten Englisch natürlich und Spanisch.
Nee, okay. Ja. Spanisch auch?
Ja, Spanisch auch.
Und wo hast du diese Sprachen gelernt?
Mit meiner Mutter. Meine Brüder, wir sind halb Amerikaner und halb Mexikaner.
Ach so.
Meine Mutter kommt auf Orizaba, auf Mexiko. Die französische Studentin in meiner Schule wohnte nicht mit meinen Sprachen in Französisch. Ich wusste nicht, warum. Und meine vierte Sprache wurde Deutsch.
From the short interview clip, it's easy to say he has some basic understanding but makes a lot of grammar mistakes and vocab mistakes. It is the type of German I am used to from travelers who learn small talk vocab but no actual grammar, as the sentences don't fully sound right. It is understandable, but only because of context. I have no idea what he said about his French classmate, and the interviewer nodded in a way German would do when you can't get what the person is trying to say. Vocab is A2 to B1 for me, but grammar definitely puts him in the beginning of A2. He speaks with difficulty and has to restart his sentences even for simple sentences. His pronunciation is just okay. I fully agree with the mistake pointed out by the above reviewer. I mostly agree with the other reviewers. He is struggling to form even the most basic sentences, and there's quite a few grammar and pronunciation mistakes in those complete sentences. I also have no idea what he was trying to say about the French classmate. A1 to A2 is my verdict. I agree with the other reviewers around an A1, A2. Okay, so naturally his German has been pushed down to like an A2 range. Next up, Finnish.
Silloin kun eräänä päivänä mä olin Meksikossa, kuulin kun heti yksi mies sanoi jokaille, joku kysyi hänestä, mistä päin sinä olet. Hän sanoi, että hän on suomalainen, hän on Suomesta. Ja yhtäkkiä mä sanoin, joo, minäkin puhun suomea, hauska tutustua ja niin edelleen.
The interview. He makes some grammar mistakes, especially mistakes with word inflections, but the meaning comes across anyways. He seems kind of unsure when speaking, and based on this, I don't know if I would call his Finnish conversational, definitely not fully conversational, but I do think he has learned the language, he definitely knows some Finnish. Okay, so we've had to push his Finnish down to like an A2 plus type of area, or an A2 to B1. Next up, Italian.
Bueno, io volevo chiederti che lavoro fai.
Non c'è nessun lavoro per me ora. Domani vado a fare limpiezza di, come si dice, alfombra.
Tappeto.
Sì, tappeto.
Come hai imparato la lingua?
E posso parlare, io capisco perché fu per me molto facile che già parlo di spagnolo, sì, fu molto semplice per me.
Ce ne hai una che ti piace particolarmente, una a cui sei più affezionato?
Mi piace particolarmente il finlandese, il finno.
Finlandese, sì.
Sì, posso dire finlandese in italiano?
Finlandese.
Finlandese.
He claims to be fully conversational, but from this not even 2 minutes video alone, the first 5 seconds already didn't make any sense. I'd give him a high A1, low A2 max, but not fully conversational. Wait, was that supposed to be Italian? If he spoke Spanish directly, he'd be more understandable. The first few seconds were just pure gibberish. Jokes aside, high A1 is probably a fair assessment. I'm sure it's true that he understands more than he can speak, but if I'm judging him only based on what I'm hearing, then he's an absolute beginner A1. Okay, so based on that, his Italian takes a little bit of a head dive down into the A1, A2 territory. Next up, Latvian.
Man liekas, ka šodien līslietus ārā, un vēl kāds spīd saule. Varbūt vēlāk spīd saule. Nezinu.
Okay, so based on all of this here, there is just a lot of mistakes, basically, in the very short segment that we did get. The sentences and words, he says, are pretty simple, but he does stress the wrong syllables, and there are some grammar mistakes, but you can tell he has actually put some time into learning it. He seems to know enough that I believe he can communicate to some extent, i.e. above A1, but it's impossible to tell how well he would be able to handle an actual conversation when the only examples of his knowledge are two completely isolated sentences. So this is one of those cases where I was basically not going to include it, but we got a little bit more than one sentence, so I included it. Okay, so Latvian goes somewhere down between A1 and A2 range, but then again, it could be much higher if we have more evidence. Next up, Spanish.
Son el inglés, el español, el portugués, el rumano, el ruso, el checo, eslovaco y búlgaro. Enseñaba un poquito de alemán, de francés. Habían conciertos donde los niños cantaban en otros idiomas. Y yo viendo el texto, fácilmente me memoricé las palabras que están escritas en francés. En ese trabajo sí, yo era muy feliz o utilizaba mucho mis talentos de idiomas.
Conclusion, I'd give him a B2, but I still don't think he's anywhere near C levels. I listened to the entire radio interview in Catalan, and he speaks Spanish at times. He's half Mexican and he moved to the US as a child. He speaks well, though his Spanish has been affected by not growing up in Mexico. Clearly his mum helped him, and he's visited Mexico. In spite of some mistakes, he's basically native. Now, we've moved his Spanish down to a B2 because, well, we don't ever see him speaking about any type of complex topic, but he could just as easily be a C1 or even more. But based on what we have, he's a B2 at the moment. Okay, let's take a look at his Portuguese.
Posso falar português porque os meus amigos da escola, eu falei com eles todos os dias. Depois da escola, saímos todos juntos. Só para desfrutar a cidade. Então, é por isso que eu posso falar português.
How am I supposed to analyze less than 20 seconds of content? I mean, his pronunciation was decent, although kind of used a weird mix between Brazilian and European Portuguese, even though he claimed to lack exposure to the European variety. So I'm guessing that he struggles to just reproduce our accent. It's hard to analyze with 20 seconds of content. I could understand what he was saying. His pronunciation was very weird for me, though. For me, his pronunciation, as the first reviewer says, it's a mix between Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese. P.S. I think his Portuguese was better in 2018 video, which could indicate his speech getting worse. I agree the clips are too short, but in my opinion, they're enough to rule out a B2 or a C1 level. He uses 5 different phrases to express a single thought, something a fluent speaker would normally express with more connected speech. I'd place him at a B1 at best, probably an A2. Now, the ratings for Portuguese were pretty much all over the shop, so I'm going to give you a range. So his Portuguese could be anywhere from A2 all the way up to B2, based on what we've seen so far. So it's just too hard to say. We have too little content. And finally, Russian.
Когда вы начинаете изучать русский язык?
Я начал в средней школе, когда я познакомился с студентами, которые жили на русском компаунде. Вы знаете, что у нас в Вашингтоне, в центре, вот этот район, маленький район, называется Tenley Town. Наша школа расположена точно там, в центре, как все посольства.
В Вашингтон, потому что в Барселоне нет.
Нету, к сожалению, это жаль.
Dude's only fluent in Russian if we consider roughly A2 level fluency. It was honestly just hard to listen to him, and I don't even mean the accent. The guy sounds like he's having a hard time speaking the language like a beginner would. I think the previous reviewer was a little too harsh, but overall I agree. He's not very comfortable with the language and makes some mistakes. He's understandable overall. I would say something like an A2, maybe a lower B1. Now, reviewer 3 said A2 not fluent, unfortunately, and then they massively broke down basically his grammar, pronunciation, and shady stuff. I want to highlight in that video 3, it looks like he might be reading from his screen. His eyes are moving from side to side. Additionally, he isn't speaking with a native or even a fluent speaker of this language. He is definitely conversational unless he's faking it or just saying sentences he learned. However, the topics he holds his conversations on are very basic, which does imply that those are the ones he's comfortable with. I think he's good at speaking at his level, but there is no evidence of him being better than a B1. Okay, so his Russian has been pushed down to maybe like a high A2. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to clean up this board, and based on the video evidence we have out there of him speaking languages, we're going to basically show you the final outcome. Okay, so after cleaning this all up, we can see the final outcome for his languages is like this. The majority of his languages don't get beyond an A2. And these are the ones that we have some type of evidence for. Like I saw the Chinese one. The Chinese one was just basically an A0. Like it just didn't exist. The real issue for me here is less so the individual, because he seems to be just some random carpet cleaner who loves, learning languages. He makes outlandish claims, the same type of claims, the guy down at the pub type of thing makes. So nothing too bizarre. The problem for me here is the interviewers, the newspapers, the reporters, the YouTubers, the scientists. No one seems to have at any point actually checked his abilities. Now, we saw him being interviewed in very short segments with actual legitimate polyglots, but did they say anything? Or did they just gloss over the fact and just leave it as it is, which is a very common problem I see within the language learning space. Like Olly Richards right here, he is a capable polyglot from what I've seen so far. Maybe I need to do an investigation. Didn't he look into this at all? Didn't he dive into these specific languages, the ones that he shares with this guy, and basically check that he actually speaks these languages before making a video where he says he learned 24 languages? Yeah, he's learned them to some degree, but most people, when they see a video like this, they think the guy must speak a lot of languages, and the guy himself is claiming fluency in a bunch of languages which we don't have any evidence for, which leads to the studies. Now, I want to go through the study as the last part of this video because this is just bizarre to me. Okay, so based on the study, the table of all participants who listed 10 plus languages and rated each of their languages on a 0 to 20 scale, and how many languages they claim to speak at each estimated level, assigned to the proficiency ratings in a way that makes sense to me. So we actually had some people who can read these studies, go through them and critique the studies, okay? So they basically got people who speak 10 plus languages, they put it there on a table, and then they plotted it here on this chart. Okay, you notice anything here with this chart? We've got the blue line going like this. This here is Vaughn. Vaughn is, his ratings do not match anyone else's here. He's clearly outside the general accepted range for the other participants of this study. So it's did they not see this when doing this study and publishing this study and reviewing this study? Now, I'm going to read through this very large section here at the end, and you can leave at any point if you want before this, but I think this is kind of important. Basically, his claims are by far the most unrealistic, with 32 languages he probably says are B1+. The person with the second most outlandish claims basically has 20 languages listed at B1+, with 4 of them listed at 18 plus 20 to proficiency, while Vaughn claims 10 at 18 to 20 proficiency. Remember, 20 on the scale was native level like. Vaughn's saying he's got 18 languages approaching that. They claim 48 languages overall, with 28 of them being at around the upper beginner level. Another thing to note is that while they define the upper end of the scale 20 as native-like proficiency and lower end as minimal proficiency, they don't seem to have defined what proficiency level all the stages in the middle correlate to. And there's some wiggle room when it comes to the high and low end of the scale, depending on who you ask. Native level proficiency could be anything from B2 to C2, which is a problem I have to tackle with all the time when making these videos. And minimal proficiency could be anything from a couple of words to A2. Basically, it's very likely that the participants in the study all had different understandings of which proficiency level each rating corresponds to, and therefore the data is not very reliable. And finally, we've got this last section right here, assessment of the study by someone who's versed in the field and knows the basics about how to interpret brain scans. And then you guys can read this, you can pause or you can go to the attached document. But basically, there's so many problems with this. So we've got a study here which in terms of the study and its design is flawed, okay? We have so many issues with the study. So overall, I've got less issues with the guy. I've got more issues with the fact that no one seems to have actually vetted this. Now, maybe he actually does speak a lot of these languages to a high level. It's just we have no evidence of it. And that's pretty much it. And I'll see you all in the next video. And if you're not there, well then, I'm going to yell at you until I lose my voice, because I actually feel like I'm starting to lose my voice right now. Not sure why. Maybe it's just that there's just too many freaking things going on here.